The tavern sat too low for anyone who still remembered what it was like to stand upright before the world. The ceiling was darkened by old smoke, soaked with years of grease, sweat, and fires that had never fully gone out. The smell was a heavy mix of sour ale, salted meat, and damp wood, the kind of odor that no longer bothered those who had lost the right to choose where they stayed. It was late afternoon. Light slipped crookedly through narrow windows, cutting the thick air into dirty golden streaks. Outside, Vidralis still pretended at normalcy. Inside, no one pretended at all. The knight sat alone, his armor still on, not out of pride, but out of habit. The plates were old, scratched, unpolished, where symbols had once been carved. Only worn marks remained, like scars ground down in haste. The metal did not shine. It did not reflect light. It seemed too tired for that. His sword rested beside the chair, not as a threat, but as weight. Something he still carried without knowing exactly why. Behind the counter, the tavern keeper cleaned a mug with slow, deliberate movements. He was a large orc, broad-shouldered, his posture calm. Dark hair streaked with gray was tied back behind his head. His lower tusks showed when he spoke, but there was no aggression in them. Only the wear of someone who had lived too long to still need to prove anything. That orc had once been a mercenary. It showed in his eyes that had seen fields grow too quiet after battle. Eyes no longer impressed by armor or stories. He set the drink in front of the knight without asking what it would be. "Still taking this kind of work?" he asked, his voice deep, low, respectful. The knight did not answer right away. He brought the cup to his mouth, tasted the bitter, nearly burned flavor. "Cheap drink, honest drink. It's what's left," he said at last. The orc nodded slowly. There was no judgment in the gesture, only acknowledgement. Once. The tavern keeper continued. "Men fought to sit at your table. Now they fight not to sit too close." He hung a piece of parchment on a hook behind the counter. A simple contract. Few words. Little coin. A forgotten place in Vidralis. "The ghetto," the orc said. "No one wants to go there. Too much noise. Little glory. Too much silence afterward." The knight looked over the parchment without hurry. He already knew that kind of work. The kind where no one asked how it was done, only whether it had been done. "They say it's a monster," the orc added. "They always do." The knight closed his fingers around the cup. The metal of the gauntlet creaked softly. "What they say doesn't change what they pay me," he replied. The orc watched him a moment longer. There was something there that was not pity. It was respect. The rare kind, born when one recognizes a familiar weight in another. "Even so," the orc said, "there are jobs that stain the blade, and jobs that stain the one holding it." The knight stood. The chair scraped against the stone floor. The sound echoed more than it should have. "There's not much left that can be stained," he said, securing the parchment to his belt. The orc did not smile. He did not try to stop him. "Then come back alive," he said simply. "Honor, no, but breath. That still counts for something." The knight turned toward the door. Before leaving, he paused for a moment, as if the smell, the light, and the weight of the place were trying to etch themselves into him. Then he pushed the door open and stepped out toward what no one else wanted to face. The ghetto began where Vidralis chose to stop looking. The streets narrowed suddenly, as if the city had taken a step back and decided to end there. The stone grew rougher, the walls closer, the air heavier. The smell changed first. Cold smoke, old refuse, stagnant water. Then came the muffled noise of too many people living too close together. The knight entered without announcing himself. It was unnecessary. In that place, no one asked who you were. They only watched how much trouble you could cause. Before he went far, he saw them. Clerics occupied the center of the narrow streets, standing atop crates, planks, anything that lifted them slightly above the others. They preached with symbols hanging from their chests and words too sharp for that place. They spoke of sin. They spoke of purification. They spoke of an evil that had to be torn out by the root. But one of them held the attention. The leader was old. Not fragile, truly old. His graying beard was short and well kept, his face marked by time and something else. A scar cut diagonally across his face, from forehead to the base of the jaw, pulling one eye slightly downward. It was not a fresh wound. It looked like something he made no effort to hide. He did not shout. He did not need to. His voice was firm, low, steady. He spoke like someone who had been obeyed before, like someone who knew exactly when to pause and let silence work harder than words. Evil does not come from nothing, he said. It grows when it is allowed. People listened. Some nodded. Others remained still, as if any movement might be a confession. A man in the crowd raised his hand, hesitant. "And what do we do, Father?" he asked. "What do you tell us to do, Father Altherin?" The name traveled through the ghetto with automatic respect. Altherin inclined his head slightly, as if accepting the weight of the title. "We do what has always been done," he replied. "We pay the price before it is demanded from all of us." Children shrank back. Some men tightened their grip on their tools. Fear was being worked there like raw material. "The monster is punishment," Altherin continued. "But even punishment can be lifted when there is enough faith." The knight moved through them without being noticed at first. His battered armor drew no attention. There was no shine, no symbols, no promise. Only worn metal and someone who no longer needed to prove anything. For a moment, the leader saw him. Altherin's eyes narrowed, studying him with cold curiosity. There was no hostility. There was calculation, like someone recognizing a useful tool, even if it was a dirty one. The knight kept walking. Here, faith did not come to save. It came to organize fear and point it in the right direction. He began speaking to people directly. In the ghetto, those who asked too many questions did not last long, but those who spoke too little inspired no trust either. So he stayed in between. A woman spoke of the dead while stirring an empty pot. She said their names. She named the streets. She said how many remained in each house afterward. "It wasn't out of nowhere," she said. "We knew it was going to happen." "Knew what?" the knight asked. "That he would come back." A man interrupted, irritated. "Don't pretend to be surprised now. Everyone here knows why this started." "Then tell me," the knight replied. "Why?" The man scratched his face, uncomfortable. "Because there was no other choice." Another stepped closer. "Because someone had to pay, and someone did," the knight said. "But it didn't end there." "No," the man replied. "It was only the beginning." That was when the knight noticed who everyone looked to before answering. A man dressed too well for the place. Always clean, always fed. He did not speak loudly, but when he spoke, the others listened. He was the one who distributed food, the one who organized shifts, the one who spoke with the clerics. "It's that woman's fault," the man said without hesitation. "The witch." "Why?" the knight asked. "Because she's always meddled with the wrong things," he replied. Healing, harvests, bindings, promises. That kind of thing never comes without a price. And who died? The knight asked. Our people, the man answered. People who took part, and those who didn't. The man shrugged. No one reported it. The knight looked around. He saw no outrage, no surprise, only exhaustion. So you knew, he said. We knew, the man replied. And we'd do it again if we had to. The knight nodded slowly. Here, no one pretended to be innocent. But everyone wanted someone else to fix the problem. He walked away knowing he was not dealing with an isolated mistake. It was something the entire ghetto had chosen to carry, until the weight began demanding payment in return. He found the clerics gathered near a collapsed structure, where something like a temple must once have stood. Only broken columns remained, stones stacked carelessly, and a symbol hung too high, as if faith needed to distance itself from the ground in order to keep existing there. They did not move aside when they saw him. On the contrary, some smiled, others whispered. The leader stood among them. Father Altherin looked even older up close. The scar cutting across his face was stark under the harsh light of late afternoon, pulling one eye downward and giving him a permanently suspicious expression. His graying beard was short, well kept. He leaned on a simple staff, not from weakness, but as someone who liked to remind others that he was still standing. You came to speak about the woman, Altherin said before the knight could open his mouth. It was not a question. I want to know where she is, the knight replied. Some of the clerics laughed quietly. One spat on the ground, too close to the knight's boot. Always the same, a younger one said. You arrive, ask questions, think you are in charge. Altherin raised a hand, calling for silence. His eyes traveled over the knight's worn armor, the arrest markings, the unadorned sword. A quick inventory. Precise. I thought you didn't involve yourself with witches, the priest said. I thought you dealt only with monsters. I am dealing with one, the knight replied. Altherin's smile widened slightly. Then you already know what she is, he continued. A woman who offers healing and collects in silence, who promises better harvests, love where it should not exist, who claims to serve ancient forces. Where is she? The knight repeated. One of the clerics stepped forward. You should be grateful, he said. If it weren't for us, this place would have been lost for good. Lost to whom? The knight asked. The cleric hesitated. Altherin answered for him. To things that grow when no one has the courage to impose limits. The knight felt the gazes tighten around him. They were not fearful. They were curiously contemptuous. I believe she went too far, Altherin continued. It began with small healings, better harvests, things people accept without asking questions. But ambition grows quickly in those who tamper with ancient forces. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, almost confidential. She wanted more, greater rituals, promises she had no right to make. People died because of it. And when you meddle with that kind of power, blood always follows. He held the knight's gaze, steady, like a man who believed his own lie simply because he had repeated it often enough. If there is a monster here, he concluded, it was born of her will. The knight did not answer immediately. Curious, Altherin said, shifting his tone. I expected someone different. Different how? The knight asked. The priest inclined his head slightly. With honor, he replied. But I'm told that no longer follows you. Silence settled. The Dishonored Knight, one of the clerics said, too loudly. I thought that was just a story. Some laughed. Others nodded, satisfied to finally place a name on it. The knight remained still. He neither denied nor confirmed it. "So 'tis you," Altherin said. "The one who does what must be done, and then vanishes. A perfect man to handle filth. Where is she?" the knight asked for the last time. Altherin sighed, as if tired of a pointless conversation. "Her cabin lies beyond the marsh," he said, "where the city truly ends, if she is still alive." The cleric stepped aside, clearing a path with calculated indifference. The knight turned away without answering. Behind him, he heard Altherin say, almost like a twisted blessing, "Do what you do best, Dishonored Knight." He headed toward the marsh, certain that no one there wanted the truth. Only someone willing to carry the blame for them. The cabin stood where the ghetto stopped, pretending it still belonged to Vidralis. The ground softened, uneven, pulling at his boots with every step. The marsh breathed there. Stagnant water, exposed roots, too many insects. The air was thick and wet, heavy with the smell of slow decay and plants crushed by time. The cabin was small, built of dark wood and poorly fitted stone. Old, but once cared for. Herbs had been hung beneath the eaves, now torn down and scattered across the ground. The door stood open. The knight stopped before approaching. He studied the terrain. Fresh marks in the mud, many of them. Not just signs of someone being dragged away. There had been haste, confusion, and looting. He entered. The interior was in disarray. Shelves shattered, vials broken across the floor. The scent of herbs mixed with metal and sweat. The central table had been overturned, as if someone had searched for something with too much anger to be careful. Then he heard the first movement. Footsteps. Three, maybe four. None of the bandits bothered to hide properly. They emerged from the corners of the cabin with knives and clubs, far too confident for men who did not understand what they were facing. The knight did not speak. He moved first. The sword left its scabbard in a short, economical motion. The first bandit raised his blade too late. The strike was not powerful. It was precise. A cut across the wrist. The knife fell before the man understood why. The second tried to flank him, but slipped on the mud dragged inside. The knight drove his reinforced boot into the man's knee. The crack came before the scream. The third was faster. He tried to strike at an exposed gap in the armor. The knight turned his body, let the blow scrape against metal, and answered with the pommel of his sword to the man's face. He did not kill him. He broke something. Enough. The fourth hesitated. There is always one who hesitates. The knight advanced just enough to make him drop his weapon and run. He drew a deep breath. It was not over. That was when he heard voices outside the cabin. Firm voices. Organized. Clerics. They did not enter right away. They surrounded the cabin. The knight felt the shift in the air, that uneasy certainty that the fight now had intent, not opportunism. The first cleric entered with a mace. The second carried a short blade. They were not soldiers, but they were not peasants either. They had learned to kill with excuses. The knight stepped back, using the overturned table as partial cover. A blow struck the wood and a splinter flew, cutting his face. He felt warm blood run down his skin but did not lose focus. The cleric with the mace charged with brute force. The knight let the strike fall where he no longer stood. The mace slammed into the ground, sinking into the soft earth. It was enough. A sideways blow, straight to the neck. Not elegant, necessary. The second cleric tried to exploit the opening. The blade found an old weakness in the armor near the shoulder. Pain flared sharp and dry. The knight grunted, but did not retreat. He drove his body forward, closing the distance. He took the advantage away from the short blade. His elbow struck the cleric's throat. Once, twice. Outside, more footsteps. More of them. The knight left the cabin before they could fully surround him. The terrain was bad. He knew that. That was why he used it. He drew them toward the more flooded ground, where every step demanded effort, where armor weighed more, where mistakes were costly. One cleric slipped. Another tried to help him. The knight gave them no time. A horizontal strike, a shove, a body falling into dark water. But they learned quickly. One struck his flank with an improvised spear. The impact threw him backward. The mud swallowed part of the weight. He rose with difficulty. His breathing was heavy now. His left arm trembled. It was not easy. It never was. He drew a slow breath and adjusted his grip on the sword. The clerics advanced together, confident that numbers would win. That was when the knight changed the rhythm. He stopped, retreating. He advanced. A quick strike to the knee. A turn out of the spear's reach. The sword found a gap between leather and cloth. Another cleric fell. The last hesitated and paid for it. The knight drove him to the ground with a hard blow to the helmet and held him there with his weight. The blade pressed against his neck. "Where is the woman?" he asked, his voice low, controlled. The cleric tried to spit, but the mud entered first. "Forest," he choked. "They took her." Deeper. The knight withdrew the sword. The man did not rise. He stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, feeling pain spread through his body. Blood mixed with the marsh water. There was no triumph, only the realization that he was still alive. The knight looked back at the destroyed cabin, at the trampled herbs, at the emptiness left behind. Then he turned toward the forest. The job had grown larger, and he knew it would not get cleaner from there. The forest closed in too quickly. The trees grew twisted and close together, with low branches and thick roots crossing the ground like natural traps. Daylight barely reached through the dense leaves, leaving everything tinted green and damp. The air smelled of wet earth and rotting foliage. The knight moved carefully. Pain throbbed in his shoulder with every step, but he ignored it. It was not the first time he had walked wounded. He had learned long ago to let the body complain later. The trail was easy to follow. Deep footprints, branches broken in haste. A strip of cloth caught on a bush. They had made no effort to hide the path. The sound came before the sight. Voices, low, drawn-out voices, chanted in a strange rhythm. It was not a common prayer. The words did not sound like any language used in the temples of Vidralis. They were harsh, repetitive, almost sung from deep in the throat. The knight approached with caution, circling the trees until he saw a small clearing. At its center lay the remains of an ancient ruin, fallen stones forming what had once been an altar, now covered in moss and roots. It did not feel consecrated. It felt forgotten. 3 clerics knelt before the stones, chanting. One of them held a symbol hanging from a thick chain, the same symbol the knight had seen before, now stained with mud and dried blood. The healer knelt near the ruin, her hands bound behind her back. Her face was dirty, her hair tied carelessly, but her eyes were alert. She did not look unconscious. She looked like someone waiting. "Hurry," one of the clerics said, "before it grows fully dark." The knight did not announce himself. The first fell before he even understood what was happening. The sword passed through his back in a clean, silent strike. The second turned in time to raise a dagger, but the knight was already too close. Metal clashed, the impact sending pain through his injured arm, And the answer came fast. A precise cut to the leg, dropping the man into the mud. The third tried to retreat, murmuring the ritual words with a trembling voice. He had no time. A short strike. Direct dot. The chant ended abruptly. The clearing fell silent, broken only by the knight's heavy breathing. He approached the healer and cut the ropes without a word. She rubbed her wrists slowly, drawing a deep breath, like someone returning to her own body. "They weren't going to kill me," she said, her voice hoarse. "They were going to use my name." The knight picked up the symbol lying near the makeshift altar. Up close, it was even clearer that it belonged to no official cult. The markings were ancient, irregular, made for something older than organized faith. "That is not a symbol of purification," she said. "It belongs to an old god. A god that predates their temples." She gestured toward the ruin. "They were trying to finish something that began here. They wanted souls. They wanted someone to blame when it went wrong." The knight secured the symbol. "And you?" he asked. She drew a steady breath before answering. "I serve a forest goddess. Growth, healing, simple cycles, nothing that requires blood." She looked around, at the trees, at the roots overtaking the ancient stones. "I heal people. They use fear." The knight nodded. "Where is the vampire?" he asked. She pointed deeper into the forest. "There is another ruin," she said. "Older, deeper in the woods. No one from the ghetto goes near it anymore." The knight looked in that direction. The forest seemed denser there, darker, dull. "He's there," she continued. "Or what remains of him." The knight turned, adjusting his grip on the sword. Behind him, the healer spoke firmly. "He does not believe he is wrong." The knight did not answer. He moved toward the ruins, knowing the next encounter would not be easily resolved. And at this time, there would be no lie large enough to make the choice simpler. The second ruin was not far, but it felt like another place entirely. The forest changed as he advanced. The trees twisted tighter. The ground grew more uneven. Ancient stones emerged between thick roots, like bones slowly rising from the earth. The silence there was different. Not the silence of absence, but of waiting. The knight caught the scent before he saw anything. Old iron, damp stone, something too sweet mixed into the air. The kind of smell that did not belong in a living forest. The ruin was larger than the first. Broken columns formed an irregular circle around an open space. At the center stood a structure sunken into the ground, as if the place had been pressed down into the earth over the years. There were no clear symbols, only markings worn too smooth to be easily read. He stopped at the edge of the open space. He felt the weight of the place. It was not an improvised hiding spot. Someone had chosen that point for a reason. The stones were stained with something dark, old. It did not look recent. It looked repeated. That was when he heard the voice. It was low, uneven, like someone speaking without being sure they should continue. The words came with effort, separated by long pauses, as if each sentence had to be pulled out of the chest. "I try to stay away," the voice said. "But when it gets dark, everything comes back. The weight on my body, the cold ground, the hands holding me." The knight moved slowly between the stones. At the center of the ruin, kneeling, was the vampire. He was too thin, almost fragile. His shoulders slumped, his body constantly tense, as if never truly at rest. Pale skin made dark veins visible, but his face still carried clear traces of who he once had been. He wore remnants of simple clothing, torn, stained with dried earth and old blood. He spoke while staring at the ground. "I thought that if I came here, it would be quiet," he continued. "That no one would hear. That no one would remember." The knight stepped on a loose stone. The sound echoed softly. The vampire lifted his head suddenly. His eyes widened. His entire body tightened, ready to react. He did not attack. He simply stayed there, breathing fast, trying to understand what he was seeing. "You," he said with effort, "you are not from the ghetto." The knight did not answer. "They don't come here," the vampire continued. "No one comes after what happened." He rose slowly, not with aggression but with difficulty, like someone who still did not trust his own body. "I wasn't like this," he said. "I lived there. I worked carrying things, helped when needed. I wasn't important, but I didn't hurt anyone either." He looked down at his own hands, the claws trembling slightly. When the hunger started, when things went missing, when the priests began to speak, I saw the way they looked, like someone had to be chosen. The knight remained still. "They said it was necessary," he continued, "that someone had to die to save the rest, that fear needed a body." He drew a deep breath, as if the air hurt going in. "They tied my hands. It wasn't quick. It wasn't clean. Some cried. Others didn't even look. And the ones who weren't there, they knew." He pressed a hand hard against his chest. "I did there." The words hung in the air, too heavy to move. "I felt it when it ended," he said. "The cold, the dark. I thought that was it. I thought it was over." He swallowed. "But I woke up here, hungry. A hunger that doesn't go away. Something inside me that won't let me stop." He paced a few steps through the ruin, restless. "I tried eating anything. Animals. Whatever I found. Nothing worked. And then I smelled them." His gaze lifted to the night. "My body moved on its own. I didn't think. When I realized, it had already happened." A long silence followed. "I didn't choose this," he said, his voice breaking. "And every time I wake up, it gets harder to remember who I was before I died." The knight drew a slow breath. "And the others?" he asked. "The ones who didn't hold the rope?" The vampire closed his eyes for a moment. "They saw. They stayed silent. They kept living as if nothing had happened." He opened his eyes again. There was anger there, but it was tired, worn down. Pity. If no one spoke while I was screaming, then everyone was there. His claws clenched, trembling. "I don't know how to be this," he said. "I don't know how to be a monster, but I can't stop either." He pointed to his own chest. "It's like something in here keeps telling me it's not over yet." The knight remained silent for a moment that stretched too long. "I am paid to kill monsters," he said at last. The vampire stared at him, not with hatred, with fear. "So," he said, hesitating, "you came here to kill me." The wind passed through the ruin, sending dry leaves spinning between the stones. The knight did not draw his sword. He stood there, feeling the weight of someone who had already died once, and was still being punished for it. And for the first time since accepting the contract, he did not know if killing would solve anything. Rain fell lightly over the ghetto, steady, in no hurry to leave. The narrow streets reflected the faint torchlight, turning every puddle into a broken mirror. Vidralis slept far from there. That place never truly slept. Father Alherin was not alone. 4 clerics were spread around him, leaning against walls, standing too close to the shadows. They did not look like official guards, but they held simple weapons with the firmness of habit. None spoke. They only watched. Alherin remained at the center of the street where he had preached earlier. His heavy cloak, clung to his body, darkened by rain. The scar on his face seemed even deeper under the flickering light, pulling his gaze into an almost distorted expression. He waited. He did not pray. He did not pace. He simply watched the end of the street, where the curtain of rain blurred everything beyond recognition. Then he saw movement. A silhouette appeared at the edge of his vision. Tolo, Dayo, Daito, Daishente, Raumei, Moonjunsa, and Toise Hebzion. Slow dot shine. It walked without haste, as if time itself no longer mattered. The armor reflected no light at all. It only absorbed the glow of the torches, returning something dull, heavy. The clerics moved first. One adjusted his grip on his weapon. Another took half a step forward. None spoke, but the space between them and the priest shrank. The sound of footsteps blended with the rain. Alherin felt his stomach tighten. For a moment, it felt as if it was not a man approaching, but something dragged forward by its own decision. A shape carrying too much weight to be merely human. Alherin tightened his grip on the staff. Faith did not comfort him there. It never had when the night grew too quiet. The figure drew closer. Rain ran along the scarred armor, through the grooves of worn metal, over broad shoulders that seemed to carry more than steel. There was no haste, no hesitation. The clerics subtly widened their formation, forming a half circle. If they had to act, they would act together. The knight would have to pass through them first. Alherin took a step back. Not out of fear, he told himself, but to hold position. Even so, the movement betrayed something deeper. When the knight finally stepped into the torchlight, Alherin recognized the face, or what remained of it. The fresh cut, dried blood mixed with rainwater. Eyes set too deep for a man who had just completed a task. For a second, Alherin remembered his own words. About monsters, about punishment, about purification. Now one walked toward him, but he was not defenseless. He was not alone, and he knew it. The knight stopped a few steps away. Rain struck the metal hard, creating a hollow, repeating sound, almost ritualistic. The clerics kept their weapons raised. One wrong step, and the monster would fall right there. Alherin swallowed. He had never truly believed that monsters emerged from the shadows. But there, under the rain, watching that man approach without asking permission. For the first time, he was no longer certain who would survive the night. And he waited. The knight stopped before the semicircle formed by the clerics. Rain ran down his armor as if trying to wash away something that would not come off. The street was empty now. Doors shut. Windows dark. The ghetto held its breath. He said nothing. He reached into the satchel at his waist and extended his arm. A soaked cloth slipped from his hand. The hand hit the stone ground with a heavy sound. Too large to be human. Long fingers ending in hard claws, still stained with dark blood. Rain struck it uselessly, spreading red across the street. The clerics recoiled instinctively. One made the sign of his god across his chest, too quickly. Another turned his eyes away. Father Alherin stepped forward. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice firmer than someone who needed to hear the answer. The knight nodded once. "The monster is dead?" The priest pressed. The knight looked at him. "Just a second longer than necessary. What you asked for was delivered," he replied. Silence weighed down on them. Alherin held the gaze for a moment, then made a short gesture with his hand. One of the clerics stepped forward and placed a bag of coins on the ground at the knight's feet. The metallic sound echoed too loudly in the empty street. "Vidralis thanks you," the priest said. The knight picked up the bag without counting. He did not thank them. He did not bow. He simply turned and began to walk away, heavy steps marking the whetstone. Then, the sound came. Not distant, not unclear. A deep roar tore through the night, echoing between the houses, climbing the walls of the ghetto like living thunder. It was not the sound of an animal. It was not a scream. It carried pain, fury, and awareness. The clerics froze. One of them dropped his weapon. The roar came again, closer, making the torches flicker. Father Altherin went pale. "What was that?" he murmured, unable to finish the question. The knight did not turn. He kept walking, his silhouette swallowed by the rain as the roar cut through the night once more, louder, clearer, impossible to deny. In the ghetto, no one slept. That night, the Dishonored Knight kept his word.